I like your graphic as well. It's very fancy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Mike Ames recruitment show, where we're going to be talking all things email automation. I am, of course, joined by the legend that is Mike Ames. Mike, how are you doing today?
If I was any better, I'd be twins. Seriously, I'm that good. I did a gig yesterday in front of people, real people, live people. It was brilliant. I loved it, really. And you filmed bits of it as well, which is even better, isn't it?
I did. It's always nice to have live events back in the world. And Mike, we have a very special guest today, which is Lauren Howard. Would you like to explain why we've got Lauren here today?
Yes, we would. Welcome to the show, Lauren. It's
Hello.
a real honour to have you here today with us, I have to say. And, you know, you've got that thing, no, you don't mean that, Mike. I bloody do. Because a lot of people talk about email automation, right? A lot of people have a go at it and campaigns for various things. Very few people make it work, but a very, very, very tiny percentage of people really make it sing. And Lauren is like an opera singer when it comes to campaigns. It's beautiful, a thing of beauty. I have a project which I do with my clients, and it's a specific project around marketing. It's the 4 C's. So we've done them before, you know, content, campaigns, collateral, and communications. Did this project with Lauren, took it to a certain level. And the reason she's on the show is she then took it to a whole new level. And I was blown away by it. So wanted her to come on the show and share that with us. Before we crack on, now, we are very honored to have someone who can do this. Honestly, this is a really big deal for us. So if you've got any questions, you probably won't get a chance to ask anyone else like Lauren. Please put them in the comments. Anything to do with making email automation work in recruitment, anything at all, stick it in the comments and we will do our level best. Well, actually, we won't. Lauren will do her level best to answer them. So,
I'll try.
Okay, just before I ask the first question, I'll just say this, that the reason that we care about this is that it's a modern tool. It draws upon all the sort of data that's swilling around in the internet and these different automation tools that you can use. It doesn't do anything that people can't do. It just does it faster and quicker. And if you put it out to a lot of people, the ones who are interested in you will do what we call self-select. They will make themselves known to you. And that's why email marketing is fantastic. So what's the first thing that we should be talking about, do you think, Lauren? Shall we kick off with the tech? What do you think about that?
Yes, the challenge that is the tech. Yeah, definitely.
So you used a couple of things, didn't you? But you've centered on one of them, one product, I think.
Look at that. We had the first question in and it's boom. You're already straight out the gate. What software did you use, Lauren?
So at present, we use Hubspot. We transferred to this about 8 months ago, and it has transformed the way that we do things. I'd really rate this software. I sound like I'm, on commission here selling it, but I'm definitely not. It's really helped us to track all the automation, personalise things, and we've also brought our sales team onto it as well. So they're using it as a CRM as well as our marketing. So it goes hand in hand. But I've probably had about 18 months of pain trying different softwares and definitely have found the right one now.
Yeah, and I remember that stage because there are lots and lots and lots of pieces of software that do that. I'm sure you could make all of them work, but you particularly liked the data reporting and the data it gives you, don't you, from this thing, the sort of thing that you can then react to what's coming in to be able to refine the campaign and make it even better.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm able to target different demographics at automated times, set tasks for the sales team, which really helps the handover. I'm able to understand what their behaviour is. Did a campaign flop? Did no one like it? Did they click on it and we had loads of downloads? How many people have we got coming to events because they've kind of self-selected? So yeah, it's been hugely helpful.
Okay, now let's talk about the data, because if you've got a campaign, if you focus that campaign on the wrong people, it will fail, won't it?
Yes, definitely. And I've tried and failed a few times to get there, definitely.
So tell us, when we talk about, when I say data, I mean the people we're targeting at. That's what I mean. So what did you do around that then?
So we firstly identified kind of ideal client profiles, who do we need to target? We didn't just take our existing CRM data over. We mapped it out completely, and I'm talking we as in me and the team. We invested a lot of time, and I'm definitely not a data analyst, but we use things like LinkedIn referral. We mapped out the market completely and who we wanted to target. We kind of aimed for C-suite, maybe C-suite -1. Mapped that out completely, ensured that the data set was bang on, very fresh, and then started to segment it by job title.
So data points like name, job title,
Email.
email, obviously, email. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff. Did you work with the sales team during that process as well?
We did. So we was able to receive their kind of target list. We did put on existing clients as well, that were able to receive kind of content related stuff to their sector. But yeah, we worked with the sales team to identify who we should put on there or maybe who we shouldn't, and worked that way. But that did take us quite a long time to get probably around 10,000 contacts on there.
Well, I was about to say actually how many contacts, so that's answered that question. Interestingly, I was a data analyst for a short time in the 1980s, right, when neither of you were born, which is a bit embarrassing. Anyway, so, but I think the data analysis is something that is often underestimated. Let's just get it out there and make it work, and that really isn't a good idea, is it? I mean, that is not something you should do. So it took a lot of time, as you said, but you had support from the management within ENG where you work, that you weren't rushed into kind of getting the campaign out quickly. Matt knew that data had to be right, didn't he?
Yeah, definitely. So we did have a long time, time period invested where we were getting that data right, mapping it out. It wasn't an overnight project. The data did take weeks and weeks for us to get right. And we continue, we're always continually refreshing the data. I think statistic-wise, you lose about 5% B2B data every 3 months. I don't know if that stat still stands, but I think that's what I've heard. So we have to make sure that that's happening all the time. We have to check the bounces, soft and hard, and check our kind of sender stuff. But yeah, the data, they knew it wasn't going to be a real quick, burner. It was going to take time.
Let me just dig into that for a second, because the bounces, right? You mentioned the bounces. One of the tricks that some of these snake oil salesmen say is automating. You can just put your feet up and you know what, the business will roll in. No. But normally, if you've never used a kind of an auto mailer of that nature, you'll have a really good online reputation, which is a physical thing, right? So if you're sending emails and people are opening them and reading them and responding to them because they know you, then your online reputation is very good. When you start to send emails out to people that don't know you terribly well, and they get bounced or they get sent to junk or they get deleted without being read, then your online reputation will be damaged. And the more it gets damaged, the less of your emails get through. Now, you were very keen on that, weren't you? Looking at bounces and data to, again, make sure you weren't sending stuff to people that weren't reading it.
Yes, definitely. So we tend to send in smaller batches. We do a lot of A/B testing. We ensure that the people that are getting it resonates with. And as I say, not every campaign is going to be, a top flyer, but it's about monitoring the data, looking at the behaviours of the people that we're sending to. And for example, we send to a lot of HR directors. They tend to like things like remuneration reports and talent trends. So we know what's going to go well with other people.
Right, so that's the hook, isn't it? Which we're going to talk about in a little while, because that's, I reckon, really important. Once you've got the data right, the next thing is the hook. But before we do that, just want to hark back to something I said a minute ago, and I get this a lot when I run these projects with people. They honestly think this is the end of all their problems. It's like we just put this in and press the button, really, and then it all happens. Right now, you put a lot of work into it, didn't you? And still do put a lot of work into making sure that it actually works. We've talked about the data, obviously, but also developing and crafting the campaigns. You hinted at A/B testing. Maybe people don't know what that is. Maybe you could share that with us and how that kind of works into this process.
Yes, definitely. So we test everything from kind of subject lines to content of the email and layout of the email by sending a batch campaign out, say, for ease here, 50 each. How did A resonate? How did B resonate? And we choose which, landed better and go through that process. And it is a lot of work building these campaigns, building the automation, checking what actions you want from them. Because as you say, a lot of people probably think they hear automation and go, click a button, sit back, wait for the vacancies to roll in. If only that happened. But yeah, there is a lot of testing, a lot of failing, a lot of trying and failing, a lot of failure, but great results at the end of it.
When I first, because a little bit of background on Lauren, when I first met you were a recruiter, I think, at the time.
Yes.
And we're hopping across onto the dark side of marketing where we all live. And you were afraid to death of failing. And I remember conversations we had is, no, marketing is about failure. That's what it's all about, is learning what doesn't work and stop doing that. And eventually, weirdly, what's left is what works. I mean, that's how you must view campaigns, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. It's a big mindset shift, because you're in a recruitment agency, in a consultancy where, it's profit led, it's about hitting targets and revenue, and then suddenly you're doing something else and I'm like, that isn't working, and where's my kind of target and my revenue coming from? But it's not a straight path from A to B.
Well, do you remember you insisted on a target, didn't you? Matt said, well, don't bother, and I said, I wouldn't bother, really. I don't think I'd bother. And you said, no, I need a target. And you picked what I think was quite an ambitious target. But it is right to say that you've achieved that entire annual target in 3 months using these campaigns. That's correct, isn't it?
Q1 this year.
We are not putting the number on there, but I'm telling you now, it was ambitious. And you smashed it by a factor of 4. So I think there is great things that can happen on this, but there's a lot of work that's going on underneath as well. Have we got any questions coming in, Kirsty?
We have had a couple of questions. So some people are having a little bit of trouble on the video stream. If that's the case, I did pop the YouTube link to this video in the comments as well, so you can pop over to YouTube and see it. We have had a good question. It's quite a specific question, but any ideas about like email subject headings? Have you got any like simple tips or something that you could share?
I would definitely recommend a lot of different subject checkers. So short and sweet tends to work quite well. Something not controversial, but picking, I think we'll talk about the hook shortly, but getting that hook across in the subject. If your subject flops, then you could spend hours and hours creating and crafting wonderful content, but it's never going to be seen. So the subject is really important with email automation. So subject checkers, short and sweet, and any statistic tends to work. So if you've written something and it's like 17% of people think this, I'd try and incorporate that in the subject.
You can online, there are some subject line checkers which you can put your subject line in, and it will score them. I'll put a link to one of those. There's loads of them, but I'll put a link to the one that we use into the comments. Or I'll get Kirsty to do that later, maybe. But so you can see. But that is crucial, because if you don't open it, they don't read it really, and your campaign fails. So it's when we've talked about AIDA on this show before. The subject line is the first A. It's attention. Got to get their attention, else nothing else happens afterwards. So, any other questions there, Kirsty?
I think we did have somebody who asked the provider that you used before HubSpot, but I know that you necessarily aren't comfortable saying things that didn't work for you. Rather, that's why we focused on HubSpot as the one that did work for you, right?
Yeah,
it was more dedicated towards really winning candidates than clients. It was safe to say that, weren't it?
Yeah, we were trying to bend it, I think, which partly is the reason that it didn't work. We were trying to bend it to our way of working, but it was very candidate focused.
I think the secret is in the name there. But anyway, right. So now the other aspect of this, of course, is let's be very clear what these campaigns are really aimed at doing. And that is to start a relationship. That's what it does. Now, occasionally they'll bring you directly work, won't they? You get a vacancy because of this work, and that's great. But really, it's about getting to people that ordinarily would pay no attention to you at all, starting a conversation so that your relationship builders or your salespeople can then take that and get it over the line. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. We're there to help open the doors to those conversations. Myself and the team aren't there to win the vacancies necessarily. If they come through as a direct result, that is fantastic, but that isn't our aim. Our aim is just interaction or engagement within the campaign, which we then pass over to get converted by our business development team.
And that's an important thing as well, because to begin with, and this is no reflection of ENG, because it happens everywhere I go. Everywhere I run this project, I get this kind of response in that the salespeople are a little cynical about what the marketers can do when it comes to campaigns of this nature, probably with good reason, because the snake oil salesman have been around and it hasn't worked, and so people think this is a failure. But you worked very hard to get those people on your side, didn't you, to build that trust?
We did, yes. I mean, we had great internal relationships with them anyway, which is a massive factor. But yeah, proof is in the pudding. And at first, when there are failures and things don't, come immediately, and there isn't an immediate response, it's like, well, how can this work? And a lot of business developers do look for an instant win. I think that's fair to say. A lot of salespeople are looking for the win consistently. So marketing, so how does that fit in with what I'm doing? But now that they've seen the success, it's working really well. But we had to work at building that relationship, and mainly the handoff point. At what point do you pass it to the sales team? If you do it too prematurely and it's like, well, they're really cold and it's not going to work. It's about building that relationship to a really good point. And
that's something you've learned over time doing, isn't it, really?
Yes, yeah.
You very much have worked together with them, haven't you? It's been that kind of relationship process where that you work for them and they work for you to make it actually happen. So ultimately, ENG makes more money, basically, which is what we want.
It benefits everyone. And I think they've been really helpful, even with the content side. No one knows their market better than them. So we've been able to source their information. It's just a relationship that's working well now.
Okay, let's move on to a typical campaign, because I'm sure people would like to know. We've talked about campaigns, right? And there's all sorts of ADA campaigns that you can use, and we did quite a few at ENG. Snail mail campaigns, you send anything through the post, but specifically today we're talking about email campaigns. So that's a series of emails. So can you share with us kind of how many emails there would be and what they're supposed to be doing, and really how they work for people?
Yeah, sure. So we tend to send in smaller batches, between maybe 100 and 250 recipients at a time. We don't tend to blast, thousands of emails out. It tends to be a couple of touch points a month. That's what works well for us. We tend to do either 2 or 3 stage email campaign, and at each stage the automation, have they opened it, have they clicked on anything, and that decides the next action. So 80% of what we do is content led. It's around research and insights that myself and the team have done, chunky content such as reports, salary surveys, things that are interested and zeitgeist in their market. And that's how the email automation works. We send it to them. If they open it, great, they get the next part. If they don't, they get a subject swap, and so on and so forth. So it looks a bit like a spider's diagram. I'm doing all this.
Let me dig in a little bit there, really, because of this content piece, which you and I worked a lot, didn't we?
You have some questions on that as well, Mike.
So. Well, hey, let me not answer the questions. Let's ask the questions and let Lauren answer them.
Okay, so we've got some stuff. This is more about the email rather than the content, which is why I wanted to get in it first. So first question is from John, which is HTML or plain text emails. Which one do you use? Because obviously there are any number of snake oil specialists out there who tell you one or t'other.
Yes. So for us and our markets, plain text tends to work better. I don't want to say that as a blanket because we've had to do a lot of testing. We do a lot within our health and safety recruitment brand, and things like video works really well for them, whereas financial services, plain text works really well because of different securities and servers. I don't sound that technical there because I'm not. But from our testing, I'd say kind of plain text. But again, it comes down to the testing and the demographic.
Okay, thank you. And that leads nicely on to the next question, which is a great question from Natalie, which is, you mentioned A/B testing a lot, and you mentioned you do it on the subject line. Do you test then the content that you send out and the layout? Do you test everything? Where do you stop at?
So we don't A/B test every single one of those factors each time. One, because of time constraints, but we also have got a bit of a behavioural tracking through the data. So we tried and tested, but yeah, we do test content and we do test layout, but not every campaign. It just
you find for a certain demographic they respond to a certain structure, and once you know what that structure is for their demographic, you know what, it's kind of okay if you keep using that. That's okay. Whereas a subject line or an email can change. It's just bizarre, really. You really have to test those, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. Mike wrapped it up far better than I did, but yeah, we focus on the data. If, for example, we've tried and tested something, we're sticking to a layout and it's working really well, and then suddenly all of our potential influence contacts drop right down, then we change it up and test it again.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, so let's just quickly
I just
talk
have
about
one more
content.
quick question,
No,
really quick question, which is, can you start sending these campaigns to new contacts straight away if you don't have their consent because of all that like GDPR thing? How do you deal with that?
GDPR stuff. If you have a legitimate interest, like they're a legitimate prospect on the B2B side, I believe, yes, you can. Of course, in each email, they're able to unsubscribe and opt out of any communication, and then you can work around that relationship.
Okay, fantastic.
That's my understanding. B2C is a different kettle of fish. If you're targeting very small companies or consumers, then the rules are a little different. Although it appears that people are ignoring the rules at their own peril, I think. But there you go. Yeah. So okay, so let's get back to content now. So if you have a campaign, in the center of it, we have a thing called a hook, and if the hook is weak, the campaign will fail because it's the idea of the hook is to draw people in, and then if you have subsequent campaigns, because you don't just make a win on one campaign, somebody could go through 2 or 3 or 4 campaigns before they actually react and self-select with us. That's right, isn't it?
It is, yes. So we assign like a scoring number to them. So
which is in HubSpot, isn't it? It's in HubSpot, isn't it?
It is in HubSpot. So the higher the score, the higher, engagement rate they've had, and therefore that kind of dictates, right, what kind of content we send them.
Right, but the content is king, really. And you said, well, 80% of it is content, and then we have some other things, sometimes offers or promotions that you might be putting out there, which works. It doesn't work percentage-wise as much, but when it does work, it's much more likely to get you a sale, obviously, because it's a promotion. But in terms of the content, you mentioned the chunky content, which means, stuff that you've done research or kind of a how-to guide or some interviews that you've done, or something which has taken you some time. We always say with chunky content, it's content that you'd almost be prepared to pay for. That's how good it is, right? Now, when it comes to that content, you have tested that out, haven't you, to find out what resonates with the demographic? That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So we kind of focus on 5 core sectors here, and each of them like to digest content in different ways, whether that's video, chunky reports, everything in between. So yeah, we've done a lot of tests on that.
And in addition to the content, which works, because there's a thing called a proofing group. So you can put a piece of content through a proofing group, which we can talk about another time on this show, because it's a quite useful thing to have, actually. And in the early days, we did quite a bit of that, didn't we? To figure out what, and then once you've got it, you're okay. You can kind of produce things of a variation of the same, and it will be fine. It's okay. Don't need the proofing group every time. But you also support that with thin content on social media, don't you? So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So Mike very kindly educated me on the long form LinkedIn posts, grabbing people's attention in that way to kind of, again, get engagement. But LinkedIn works really well for us. It's where our demographic is. But yeah, we kind of support the big chunky content we get our business development team to put these posts up and draw engagement in that way too. But
you write many of those posts for them, don't you?
Yes, we are. They're ghostwriters.
Yeah, I think that's it. Really, I think that is. There's a skill attached to that. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on very briefly, and I know we're running out of time, and there might be 1 or 2 questions before we finish, but events. Now, I think events are massively important. And of course, you can do face-to-face, and you can do electronic events like webinars and what have you, and workshops. But you use them quite a lot, don't you, in the business, as a hook and outside the hooks as well?
Yeah, definitely. So these events that we put on, both virtual, kind of face-to-face, we exhibit at shows, they tend to pass the so what test. What's in it for them. People are interested in, especially now, I think there is a need for that social interaction. People are interested, and if the topic resonates with them, then they're more likely to self-select, come to an event, and then we can market to them in a different way. So events for us have been successful.
If you get them to the right event, you can pretty much just hand them over to the relationship builders then, can't you? Pretty much. Yeah. Your job is done, really. It's finished. So, and you, as a hook, because an event is content, it's just a form of content, that's all it is. As a hook, events are strong content, aren't they?
They are, because you can then follow up with a series of content from said event. You can share different media. If it was virtual, you can, talk to people and mention something like you said at X event. So yeah, that works really well for us.
Okay, now we pretty much wound up. I know Kirsty's going to do a summary and what have you in a second, and you're going to come with the top
a few more questions as well.
Oh, well, I was about to say, if there's a couple of more questions, let's take those now.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. So, the first question we've got is: do you only do engagement content type campaigns, or do you do job and candidate spec campaigns as well?
Not as much. However, I know that they do work. We tend to do a lot of engagement content type campaigns, as that works well for us and our audience. We have tested the spec campaigns, but from a different angle and doing it via video through marketing automation, and that's worked really well. But yeah, we don't tend to spec as much just due to the kind of roles and assignments that we work.
That's very bad for your online reputation, ladies and gentlemen. That is very bad. The
and
ISPs
it's almost
do not
impossible
like
to get your reputation higher once it's being lowered. It's
hard.
very difficult to do that.
Don't damage that ISP rep. No.
We protect that at all costs. And then the last question we've got currently is: we've mentioned a lot of like good opening rate, click-through rates. What would you class as a good one, as it were?
There's so much conflicting information out there that I always kind of have a look at. I mean, B2B, I think it's completely different from B2C naturally, but B2B, I've always been told you need to aim as over a 10% kind of open rate. We take a good open rate for us as above kind of 20-25%, and our click-through rates currently, we're quite happy with them. They tend to be around 17%, which I think is good.
That is really good, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we always aimed. What you remember, we talked about 15% as being the kind of threshold. Really, you need to be above 15% really for click-throughs if you can manage it. Depends what you're doing though. Some click-throughs are dreadful, aren't they? And others, for some reason, are enormous. Really, it's hard to tell sometimes.
Okay, fantastic. So I think if there's no more questions, if there are any last minute ones, feel free. I'll try and get Lauren to answer them, or if we run out of time, we'll answer them in the questions. If I can just do a quick summary before we kind of come back to get the last minute round off from Lauren, which is essentially, for me, this breaks down into three major parts. So first of all, you've got to get your tech and your data right. You've got to get your data, understand who you're targeting, what the key information is about them, and then figure out a technology that helps you support it. For Lauren, you work really well with Hubspot, so it might be worth investigating that. Again, not sponsored, if only. But it's something to take into account. Then after that, once you've got that sorted, you need a decent hook. And one of the best things to have in that instance is content, whether that is content in the form of white papers, events, anything like that. When you've got it, you need to sort of make sure that works. And you can test that out on people in proofing groups and such on. And then finally, as a sort of marketer, you need to make sure that you have that relationship with the sales team so that they understand, I'm not going to give you just job vacancies. That's not what's going to happen here, but I'm going to definitely shortcut your relationship building process so that it's easier for you to then go on and develop it. And you need to make sure that there's that like symbiosis, is that the word? That you've got between the two of you. Is that a fair summary, Lauren?
I think so, yes. I would definitely agree with that. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And before I come to you in one more second, Mike, next week we are going to be very patriotic, and we are not having a show as it's the Jubilee.
There's a break from the Mike Ames recruitment show. We do. Mars is not on air next week.
We are honouring Her Majesty on that day, but the week after, I believe we have Alan Smith. What is it that he's doing?
Yeah. If you own a business, you need an inner circle with people in it. And those people will help you achieve what you want to achieve. I like to think I am one of those people for many of my clients. Another person that you need in there is a wealth manager, not an IFA. They're two a penny. I don't mean to be rude, but you can get those anywhere. A wealth manager will understand what you're trying to achieve, and they will help you build that wealth. And Alan Smith does that. He's coming on the show. It's going to be great. I know it sounds a bit, Yawnarama. Please don't do that. One day you want to retire. You'll only do that when you've got the money in the bank or invested something, and Alan or people like Alan help you do that. My wealth manager retired last year, had him for 31 years. Thanks, Les. So going to be great when he comes on the show.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, Lauren, at this point of the show, we like to make this practical. There's going to be people watching this thinking, email automation is the way to go for me. What would you say is the first thing that they should do if they're thinking that?
The first thing, definitely define your ideal client profile, get your data right, get that sorted before you even investigate the technology. And then when you do that next bit, you're good to go. But yeah, data is key. Without a good data set, your marketing will flop.
Yeah, 100%. That's really great advice. Yeah. Okay, well, look, thank you, Kirsty, for being the hostess with the mostest. Appreciate that. Thank you, Lauren, for coming on the show. Absolutely brilliant. And just, I could have spoken to you for another hour at least, I think. Would have been great. On reflection, should have been a webinar, but there you go. Maybe next time. So, okay, so we won't see you all next week, but we will see you in 2 weeks' time with the marvelous Alan Smith. So thanks again, Lauren. Thanks, Kirsty, and see you guys soon.
Thank you. Bye.